Doo-doo. All right. I almost completely forgot what time it was. I've been working away trying to catch up on stuff. And here I am. I'm still trying to finish this Elder commission. Evening, as you can see, this is what I'm working on today. Before I get onto the witch, let me just zoom this out here a bit. I've been fighting with how I did a few test attempts on how I'm going to do that. Why is this camera not staying stable? I did a couple of interviews where I had to like move the camera around a lot, and it seems to have gotten wobbly from my doing that. Wow, that's a weird, funny angle. Here we go. All right, so yeah, I'm going to switch over to working on my witch pretty soon. Blood and Soul. Yeah, let's get in there. So you see the different textures I'm playing with. There's some rubber stamp in there, some dry brush. There's some pen stuff. I think I got a feel for it, but I have to keep it different from the smoke and fire in the background. I'm also doing with dry brush. This is almost going to turn into like a pen and ink black and white multi-textured painting. Too ambitious, and now I'm paying the price for it by every little thing I add is just increasing the complexity, especially when I finally get around to when I get these established, these shadow values, the smoke coming through here, and then the sunlight boring through these skylights is going to create a sense of dimensionality that I'm really excited about. But I had to take a couple of scrap pieces of paper. What I did is I scanned this, dropped out the red in Photoshop, and I just printed out a bunch of sheets and just tried different things. And so today I figured out, okay, some dry brush to get that swirl effect with some rubber stamp textures to actually distinguish it from the smoke. So it'll actually have like a weird, almost granular feel. And then I'm going to be going in doing some pen work and maybe a little bit more dry brush to really get that black from the sword coming out to make it feel like these ghostly faces are bleeding in. The highlights, I'm probably going to get rid of those. So I want this to feel darker than the skylights coming in. And with the light coming in, that's going to make it pop, and it's going to separate from the background. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. But again, it's like with the witches, my other deadlines, and this is why I'm not taking other commissions right now. This thing's turned into a big monster, and I don't want to screw it up. So I'm like very carefully proceeding bit by bit here. You can see there's a little bit of texture I'm putting in here. I said I didn't like it, so the only texture is going to be here. This will disappear when I render over it. Let me see. So you can see a little bit of rubber stamp texture in here, and I realized to make this pop, that's the last of it. That's gonna be all gone. I'm gonna do pen and ink coming into here, and then it's gonna be white splatter coming out. I'm gonna carefully control the white splatter to maintain the darkness of the souls being fed into Stormbringer, and this will get a lot darker, so that red in the center of the sword is gonna pop more. I might even do some red paint effects to imply some glowing here. So I might take some very, very fine and bright, borderline orange red, and splatter that in just as a final touch right into the blade at the end. And so I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work. Wow. Cool. Very cool. All right. So I did also pencil today's witch, and I found one where I don't have to censor anything for. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see it. It's a butt shot. It's a witch and a cat in her bed. I'll be able to move the camera. Oh, you know what? I guess something else I can do. Elevate it slightly. So many things I'm working on. Oh my gosh. So that's there. I'll pull this down here. Is that enough light? Well, you know what? I haven't turned on my studio room light, which helps a lot. There we go. All right. Yeah, so turn down a little bit. don't want to bash my head on this all the time here. So yeah. There we go. Just have to get a little bit away from me so I can, now I'm going to tighten everything. Wow. All right. So we're working on the witch. Well, thank you. I'm really happy. Two things. I'm very appreciative of how patient you are as I tinker away at it while I'm working on all the other things, including the daily witches. That patience is really, really a wonderful gift. Thank you so much. I do think it's going to be a really strong piece when it's done. I'm really happy with it so far. And tonight's witch. Oh, you know what? Let me just check. Click, 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 click. The campaign's got 25 days left on it. This witch, the other witches I posted since the 3rd, will, and including the ones that'll be going up on Tuesday, the one that will be going up on Tuesday, will all be added to the campaign on Tuesday. And we'll be doing that every week through the remainder of the campaign. And in fact, if I remember correctly, the 31st is on a Tuesday. So that means the last 7 of the Witchtober pieces will be not only all done on the 31st, but they'll actually be posted to the campaign page as options for people to get for in addition to the book. I'm really happy with how the campaign launched. I was talking to some people with a lot more experience with this sort of stuff than me. And they were telling me that after the first couple of days, campaigns generally dry up for a while until the last of it. But that it's important to have like that 30-day window, because if you thought that the first 3 days and the last 3 days are the most important, and they're usually the biggest days for fun for getting people to buy into your project, you need that middle 24, 25 days to just get awareness of the project out there. So so that's heartening. That's good to know. It's nerve-wracking, it's stressful. I'm already looking at, let me just take it. There's 45 total remarked signed Coven books available. I'm going to be designing, hopefully by next Sunday or the Sunday after, I'll have the remark tip-in sheet illustrated. I want to finish all the work first before I move on to that. And right now we're probably going to sell it at 45 pretty soon. And I'm looking forward to doing them. I'm going to design a really lovely page to tip in that's going to be illustrated and have room for a witch drawing and my signature. And it won't be missing the art if someone just wants a signature. So I'm designing a piece that'll tip in and it'll look lovely on its own, and I'll have a nice spot for a remark drawing. But anyway, we're at 40 of 45. So I'm rambling a bit because I've just been it's Thanksgiving weekend up here in Canada, and all I'm doing is working. I'm thankful for that. But and I think if we sell it at 45, we're going to add some more. But if people notice, before the initial 25, I think it was, or 35, can't remember. We increased the price after, because that was kind of like part of the early bird thing, and the early bird pricing in the books ended as well. And the more sketches we do, the essentially more of a burden it is on me to try and do that on top of my deadlines. So if we do hit 45, we will open another batch of 10 to 15 more, but those will probably be 85 each. Just to start to disincentivize the extra work. And on top of that, what I might do after that, if we do end up with around 60 or so remarks, and I have the 30 witch headshots, I might actually put together a small little sketchbook. I'll print it locally up here, and then I'll initially offer it to Coven and Coven supporters and Patreon supporters as a little on its own sketchbook. And yeah, so there's that. Oh my God, so many things. But let's check chat here. A lot of stuff here. Yeah, it does seem like Yeah, I saw that. Jim is such a sweet guy. Not only is he like a brilliant writer, a great artist, and an amazing teacher, he's also a great human being. And I'm really glad I'm friends with him. And I'm really lucky enough to get to hang out with him almost every week when we do our game night. So Jim is just a really good person, and I didn't ask him to do that. He just did it on his own because he's just that good a person. And I'm so looking forward to do this Conan story. I am, oh my God. I can't share anything yet. I don't know if I'm allowed to. I'm going to be working on some panels, but I'm going to be very careful. Like after Witchtober's done, I'm going to be doing like some panels on Sunday night, so you can actually see me working in the book. But I'm going to have to be very careful that there's no spoiler stuff in it. So, because I don't want to wreck, the first issue of Savage Sword. Um, so I'm really excited about that. But again, that's November. We're still just in the first 2 weeks of October here, and there's all these witches to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I did last week. I'm going to, and this one's better because I can show the whole thing. Even yeah, it's a bit of a butt crack. So I think that's YouTube safe. Although there is a pussy. Bump. Sorry, couldn't resist. Yeah, so I'm going to work on this till about 9ish. I'll take any questions, any technique stuff you want. Also, guys, feel free if you need me to go over anything I've done. I can easily pull in a different piece of paper and like show how we did it. Feel free to ask questions about technique, drawing approach, any of those things. Want to do? That's what these live streams are for. They're supposed to be like an interactive communication between me and you, the people who are taking the time to watch me do this. If you say, "Oh, how did you draw that hand? Can you show me how?" I will stop this, put it aside, pull out a piece of paper, and I'll show you how I approached assembling something or not, or any of those things. I think all of those things are perfectly good uses of this live time with you guys. So yeah. And all right, so so I'm using my usual pens for this. I use the 005, 005 to do the finer details. I also use it to do a lot of like the finer hair on the body and the head. If I need some heavy line weight, which I'll probably be using for the headboard and the footer, I use this 03, which gives me a nice juicy black thick line, although it takes a little longer to dry. And nope, that's another 5. Where's the 1? Here we go. And the 1 is what I'll be doing the majority of the figure work with, and the fishnet lines. When it's a smaller figure, I use the 005. Yeah. So those are my tools for tonight. Again, I'll probably be using a brush marker. Sorry about that. Trying to decline this. Here we go. You know what? I think I know what this is. So I got to sort something. Let me just text someone here. Tell them I can talk to them after. Boop, boop, boop. Hopefully that went through. So many things. So easy to lose track with this many things going on. All right. So, I put my pen down to start. All right. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to do her face. Probably going to do the details on the cat's face too. And I'll probably render the cat tonight while I'm on camera, so you can see me do that. I think it was a pretty quick technique. Black cats are a little tricky. I've seen people who like do a pure silhouette, which is a lovely way to do it sometimes. But what I like to do is I tend to render everything. If you saw today's Witchtober piece, there was a crow / raven, and I did similar things with that I do with the cats. and that is I get the core contours. My Mimi core is the mandatory contours of the shape down. Then I look for the areas that would be essentially as black can be on the body of the cat. And then I just make those solid black. And you'll see that in a moment. But there are areas that get hit by light on this cat. And on a shiny cat or a raven or crow, there's a gleam to it. And if you try and capture that gleam in pen and ink, a lot of times, in my experience, it doesn't work very well unless you're like taking forever to try and get those photorealistic values. So what I do is, cat looks really sad. That's not the intent. I'll pick my brush out where I put it. Actually, not be able to find my brush pen because I used it earlier today on a different thing. Oh, you know what? I can use a brush marker just as well for this. Just have to find one of those now. Where to put them? All my tools are everywhere. No, that's a pen. Is this sharp enough and does this have enough ink? That's almost a dry brush. This should work. All right, so this one's almost used up. I bought a new one, but I refill these Pentel color brush pens with my own fountain pen ink. And I find, because the stuff that comes with this is really tacky and it doesn't really dry very well on high quality paper. So this is my older one, and unfortunately I can't open it to refill it. So it's on its drag. So I'm using it as a special effect brush right now. But I can still use it to get the dark areas in this cat. And since cats can be a little fuzzy, a drying out brush works perfectly well for this. And you don't have to be, honestly, you don't have to be that careful when you're going to do this kind of like render over top of darks to get a sense of value on a cat. So I want the spine, I want the curvature, I want a little bit of this. Probably should have outlined the footer bars initially, but I just want to show you the cat technique here. So I'm more of a dry brush stroke here, letting it disappear, carefully keeping the bars intact because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to handle those bars yet. All right. All right, so you can see these areas are typically the darkest parts of a black cat, like where it kind of fades into, does that nightcrawler thing of disappearing into the shadows. I'm going to use, don't want to use the 5? No, I'll use the 1. So what I do is the hair grows in a certain direction. So I'm going to render it in that direction. Parallel lines, parallel hatching. And I'm going to go into the dark and let those lines disappear into that black area. You can do a little overlapping cross hatching. And realize this is a very forgiving technique because as long as you get the silhouette reading well, it's going to read as a cat. And this is going to give a sense of light hitting it, even if you're not being that particularly careful with it. I'm rendering in the direction of the hair that's usually inside a cat's ear. And feel free, this is it. You turn the paper so your hand moves in the most natural way possible. That saves wrist stress. I've seen so many artists who work themselves into a brace because they're always twisting and bending their wrists so much. Wow, that actually hurt. And if I just want to be a little careful around, like say the bar here, because I want to maintain a highlight, I can easily go back in after and paint with using white paint to get that highlight on the bar, but I can work a little bit faster if I have it masked off and I can just render away with my pen here. A little bit of noise that you get from cross hatching. Those little flecks of white are wonderful. I love it when I'm like doing comic work and I'm leaving little bits of white. Like I'll use a pen or a chunky marker to fill in the large black area because it leaves little bits of white. If I lay a color underneath it, it actually changes the effect of the black. Um, it allows it to have color inside it. So it's not just a solid black shape. It becomes a darkness of a certain color. So that's one of my favorite things to work with. Okay, so now I got the cat going. I go right to his back is overlapping with the bar. Maybe I should have moved the bar a bit more. I mean, we're all in control of our own compositions. So you can do all sorts of stuff. You can just move stuff until it works better for you. But I didn't feel the bar mattered, that there was a bit of a tangent with the back of the cat and the bar. Again, really, really quick mask. Why did I put it there? Really quick masking allows me to work faster, and that's why I love these Post-its. So as soon as I finish this cat, I'll check see if there's any questions or anything he wants me to talk about or bring up. So this is the back part of the cat in this corner I just created with the Post-its. So I'm going to go from light to a denser line to get that shadow. Slightly angle the pen stroke, I'd say about 15 degrees, and it turns it into cross hatching. And I turn it back another extra 15 degrees, and then I get this sense of like hair. It's all those years of like painfully drawing hairs on an animal to try and get it to look like hair, and you realize, yeah, you know what? No, sketchy lines sometimes do it perfectly. And the bedding, because it's taking up space in the witch's bed, because that's what cats do. Kitty cat. And I'll put it to the camera so you can see like those little white gaps. And I think we have to agree that didn't really take me very long. Whereas if I was trying to get the patterning and the highlights of the fur, that would actually take more time than it's possibly worth. And I can go over. I'll use the one for this. I'm going to go over heavier later. I think the bars of this bed should be black. So that means I only have to really worry about highlights right inside the contour line. I looked online for headboards and everything. So I have an idea what this headboard's supposed to look like, but I sketched it so quickly, I lost a whole bunch of the details. So I'm kind of like guessing about how these joins on the bars go. Probably could have kept a reference out, but you know, just being me, sloppy, quick, running around doing different things, trying to get them all done well. And I think I'm going to pet that line a bit. petting a line is like, so you can draw a line, stroke, but petting the line is when you essentially keep stroking on that line, and it ends up with a sketchier looking line, but it sometimes gives you more control over the shape and weight of that line. But you end up with these little like extra lines. And if you're trying to be super clean, like say Dave Stevens or Adam Hughes, you don't want that. You want to get that line done right first time through. Luckily, I'm solidly from the school of, Bill Sienkiewicz, who can do that super slick line, but prefers that energy of that line being a little scratchy and having some life in it. So I can pet my lines all I want. But if you pet your lines, you're not going to have like those super smooth, slick lines like some of the best inkers in the business give the work. So just a little bit of a highlight showing through in the bar, and with the black shapes of the bar coming across over all the details of the bedding, it'll read as a bar, even though it's black on black with the lines on the cat. Although I didn't want that happening with the head. I didn't want anything to interfere there. So that's why there's a pillow shape here to make sure none of the bars are coming close to the cat's head. It silhouettes it nicely. I got a nice directional line from the headboard coming down right towards the cat's head. And also initially when I first drew this, I had the headboard higher because they normally are, but that gave me the curve there's an ornament in the middle, but I knew I wasn't going to draw that. There's a curve, and if I had it at the height where it really should have been on the bed, it would have been coming out of around her mouth area, and I didn't want any lines distracting from her face in the area. So again, this comes into where you're in control of what you do in your images. I dropped, after I initially drew it and scanned it in, I dropped the header down, so it's much lower in the bed. I possibly could have drawn the pillows higher, but I want some of it to show through. And that way the lines connect to the shoulders. So there's a nice, almost like a demarcation of like, this all's bed, this here is the witch. Seeing the witch's head floating a bit above it all draws you into the composition. All these lines will curve through. These lines of the sheets underneath the duvet coming this way will lead into the knee. That's probably a little close to the edge than I should have done, but 7x9, right? And then everything's going to lead back into here. And then it's compositional stuff I learned in school forever ago. All right, see if there's any questions. Fripp, yeah. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I buy them. I look for sale. Like whenever they have a posted sale, I'm buying them. So I buy like these little ones. They come in a nice brick, so it's harder to lose. And I buy the 3x3s. I used to get the bigger ones, but I haven't seen them on sale for a while. I've been making do with these. I buy a big stack of them. I just bought like a massive pile of like the yellow ones. And you know what? I hate to say it. Get the Post-it brand. I'm not getting paid, but get the Post-it brand because all the knockoffs, their glue is terrible. I still have some of the knockoffs, and it's like they'll start curling up on the sticky part. And it's great if you put it in and it's in a book and the book's holding it down, it'll stick perfectly fine. But if you need it for something like art, that those cheap knockoff Post-its are the worst possible thing you can reach out for. They just don't work that well. They fall off on their own. It's not cool, man. It's a cheap product. Whereas Post-its aren't terribly expensive. As far as art supplies go, they're readily available everywhere, and they do what you need them to do, or at least what I need them to do when I'm using them for like masking off for like making my scribbly ink lines or masking off for rubber stamp work or brush work. They just do the job for me. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you figure, I wonder if it's like a top secret formula and everyone else is just trying to figure it out on their own. Because I'm thinking about it, it's like, so Post-its have been around since, I want to say, the early 90s. Because I don't really remember them in the 80s that much. It might have been you and they were an office product. And I was just completely oblivious to it. But it was in art school when I found a dollar store that actually had Post-it brand Post-its on sale, and they're cheap, and I bought some, and I don't know why I bought them. I think for like taking notes in like reference books when I was in art school, and then I just used one to mask off part of a school assignment, and I was like, oh, I'm in love. So yeah, want the sheets to be under the cat. Okay, let me grab the 005 for her face here. There's not much face in here this time around. Just a little bit of nose. And you can see, actually, when I scan all my drawings together to assemble them to print out, I'll draw everything and then I'll erase when I assemble. Like I actually drew her whole head and her forehead and everything, because otherwise the hat wouldn't necessarily sit on it properly. I left some of the nose here so I can do that stroke properly to get her nose drawn. And then it all gets covered when I render the hat, the brim of the hat. One of the best early things I learned from comics, and this is before I went to art school, was to not limit your drawing to your panel edges. So if your figure is falling outside your panel, don't just stop drawing at the edge of the panel. Draw the figure outside the panel, because it's so easy losing that information of what that drawing would happen outside the visual edge of the panel. You might screw up the drawing that's inside the panel. So now I think I've in the past showed that I draw on bond paper a lot. I will actually, sometimes I'll draw a whole panel on this translucent bond paper. You can see the lines through here. That's a cover I'm working on. So I'll draw the panel. Sometimes I'll just draw the panel on a separate sheet of paper. And before I start inking, like the way I assemble everything in Photoshop and print it out on the board, I can enlarge, reduce, move it around, flip it, all sorts of things. And because I've drawn more than the panel needs, it gives me a lot more control and versatility when it comes to making a decision of like what actually is going to be on the page. So it seems like more work, but I find by drawing on separate pieces of paper, I'm just drawing a light side of her hip here, so I have a finer pen initially. I find it goes faster if I'm drawing at a comfortable size and I'm not fighting to draw small figures. Like you've seen comics where you have like these tiny, tiny little figures and they're doing something and their silhouettes are hard to read. And because you don't know what they're doing. So why would you draw it that small if you don't have to? So if I had to draw a figure and I have to ink that size, I'd probably draw it 2, 3 times bigger. And my pens can't go any finer than what I can ink with. That's part of the reason why I use those very specific pens. Um, but by drawing the figure bigger, I get more knowledge about what the figure is going to be. That's still all that work that being put into drawing the larger figure is still in my head, and actually in a certain way in my hands when I'm inking it later, even though it's much smaller. I'd reduce that to about this size on the inking board, and the proportions are just more accurate. The gesture is usually captured a little bit better when it's reduced. It's just a good tip. Draw at your comfortable size draw beyond your panel borders, and what ends up on the page just is better, in my experience. I just really I think more artists should take advantage of that. And I think, and this is me taking advantage of digital tools that I have available. A lot of artists using digital tools, they'll draw bigger, but they'll zoom into the page at the high, super large DPI, and they'll draw these incredible figures, and they'll disappear when they reduce them. So I prefer to have a lot of practical drawing on paper, which forces me to work within the limits of what I can do without the digital interface, and then use the digital interface to correct and assemble as opposed to draw. Um, because I'm not a big fan of like how noodly and overly precious a lot of my drawing gets when I'm drawing digitally. I'll do roughs, digital roughs, because I just make a point of drawing them simply. But if I was actually trying to do, I would, I know full well I would find myself continually um, drawing too detailed in digital, because I'd zoom in and I just take advantage of it. Don't zoom, baby. Don't do that. Not good. Actually, there's some artists who just draw on post-it notes. There's I've seen it where they literally just draw on these 3 by 3 post-it notes. They'll do little sketches, and that's their daily posts. I think it's brilliant. If someone wasn't already doing it, I might have stolen it. Trying to get the sense that the comforter is like pushing against the bars here. There's going to be the obvious tucked in sheet underneath it. Oh my gosh, we're almost at 8 already. I talk too much. Well, hopefully I don't. Hopefully that was entertaining. So much information to get out there, and I also kind of miss teaching. I'm also finding I'm using the 005 with some areas that might be tricky, and I'd rather start with a finer pen and then go back in with a heavier pen if I need it. For example, I don't like, this was a mistake. If I wasn't in a rush to make sure that you got to see this, I would have like probably, excuse me, I probably would move the border over, I don't know, 3, 4 millimeters, just to give a little bit more breathing room around here on the knee. But what I'm going to do is I'm using this extra fine line from the 005, and I'm just going to let part of the knee disappear. line. I'm just going to let it go so the line doesn't draw attention to itself. There's an example about tangents. I was taught in art school by Frank Neufeld. He was a famous Canadian illustrator and designer. If you're of a certain age, you remember the books Alligator Pie and the other one, Garbage Delight, written by Dennis Lee, if I remember correctly. He was a national, Dennis Lee's still around. I think Frank's passed. And he was a brilliant designer. He was one of my profs at Sheridan College. He had this wonderful thing where it's like, if you have two people sitting side by side and there's space beside them, that's fine, right? If you have two people side by side and they're holding hands, that's fine. They're connected. But if you have two people sitting side by side and just the edges of their knees are touching, it's annoying. It's annoying to the people in the chair, but it's also annoying to look at because it's not like there's no statement. No one's really saying anything. So I'd much rather let this bit of knee disappear here and just not really draw it, like let that line go so it doesn't put visual pressure here on that line and draw attention to it. So by letting it go there, you're not forced to look at it, if that makes sense. So part of my training there. So I actually stole the way Frank told it when I was teaching, when I used to teach, and I was talking about composition and everything. I actually would have two students sit side by side, and then I'd move them to get the examples of what I was talking about. It was fun. I think before I do anything else, I'm going to finish off the footer here at the bed and then the sheets, because then that'll give me a better sense of the line weight going through. Or do you guys want me to focus on it? What do you guys want me to do? You want me to finish the footer, which I'm going to do anyway, or do you want me to work on the figure tonight? I'll let first person who answers what they want me to work on will determine what I'm drawing for the next 20 minutes or so. Figure. All right, there we go. The decision is made. All right, so right here at the bottom of the chin, because I use that petted line technique I was talking about, you can see how scratchy that chin is. Is it coming into focus at all? My thumb is. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth that chin out. I'm using a slightly thicker pen. I'm using the 01. It's on the underside, so I didn't mind doing like a rougher petted line there. But I don't want to give her like a big witch hair sticking out of her chin. So I just made it shadow side. And it smooths out the line considerably. I should show you that. Oh yeah, let's move it in closer so you can see. So now it's a thicker line, but it completely enveloped the petted thin line. So you get a smoother line there. Always torn between giving some of these witches some rattier hats, like a little bit more older and a little bit more wear in it. But I think that'll come. If we get into the 20K, I'm probably going to do a graphic novel of some length, probably almost an episodic graphic novel about what it's like to live in the Coven house with the witches, what it's like to become a witch. And there'll be a lot of like the world building I've been doing in my head ever since I started drawing these girls, women, I should say. And yeah, so there's a whole story about how they get the hats. So all the traditional things of lore are in there. I'm ripping off the Jedi. The witches have to make their own broomstick so they can fly. And they have to harvest the straw in a specific way. They have to use specific wire to bind the straw to the broomstick. The wood is of this very specific tree, which I'm not going to spoil. Some of it's just from reading into occult lore here and there, and so it's a whole bunch of like just made up on my own lore about these witches in my little fantasy world here of all these witches, and it's fun. And I think it's cute. It's kind of like I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, "Oh, it's like Harry Potter for grown-ups." And I went, "All right, I'll take that. I'll take that." I mean, which of course means that, it lacks the transphobia of J.K. Rowling, which also inspired a story that I'll hope I'll get to do. Yeah. So the plan is, if Coven is successful enough, I will do a probably somewhere between 50 and 75-page book for next Halloween. And what I'll draw next Halloween or next October will be a 31 panel story. So I'll be posting the panels over the course of October. I'll probably have to start drawing in advance. It'll definitely be written in advance. But I'll be posting a panel a day that will actually be in that graphic novel. And we'll run a campaign similar to this. So anyway, that's me talking about a lot, like a big what if. Like, what if Coven doesn't get there? Then I'll this will just be a wonderful project in and of itself. I'll have to consider what I do next October in line to that. Like, will I keep the witches going? I don't know. Probably in some way, because I love drawing them so much, and seems like enough people love seeing me draw them. There's part of me that wants to do a witch spooky season all year round witch calendar, like a 16-month calendar of witches. Um, I'm not sure how I could tie that into Witchtober, but I think a nice 16-month. I'd have to design the Witchtober pieces into the traditional squarish format of a calendar. I think, although vertical, like I'm looking at my Frazetta, I have a Frazetta calendar in my studio, and it's actually kind of like the similar dimensions to these pieces, this 7x9. But I'd probably draw them better. It would be a lot more elaborate, and it would be like spooky season year round, but it would be seasonally driven by the witches. So what do they do in August? What did they do in June? What did they do in February for Valentine's Day and all that stuff? How did they celebrate Christmas? Um, if they celebrate Christmas, they probably have some sort of more quasi-pagan festival that probably make up, even though there's like perfectly fine and serviceable existent things. But I don't want to get people confused to think that I'm actually basing this on real witches. These are a fiction. You have similarities because I'm dealing with some of the imagery for witches, but these are not the witches who have essentially a real religion. I mean, if you want to respect other people's beliefs, you have to respect the Wiccans. So I don't want to tread on their toes. So my witches are a fabrication. And I'm going to maintain that by increasingly fabricating stuff in the world. Figure's almost done. I'll use a finer line for that. Trying to use that line weight to get some depth happening there. Okay, so that shape reads nicely enough in front of the figure, so that's a good thing. That's why I shifted from the figure there. Put a little darker line on the underside of the figure here. Probably underside of the arm here too, just to give a little bit more weight and tension. All right. And there it is. As soon as my brush pen, this is what I was looking for earlier. So when I'm doing the hair, I could very specific. When I first started drawing the witches, I'd figure out the layers of the hair, but now I realize there's so much cast shadow from the hat. It just ends up being a solid black mass coming out from the brim of the hat. And then I start focusing on the lengths of the hair, the way the hair just kind of comes down, curls. One of the things I learned from studying one of my favorite painters, John Singer Sargent, is he would treat hair as a solid mass, even though it's made up of like hundreds of thousands, if you're lucky, strands of hair. He would draw a solid mass of hair in terms of like giving it value and highlights and shading and everything, with occasionally maybe a stray hair being drawn in. And I realized if you treat hair like a solid mass, it just reads like a solid mass, like the way we look at people most of the time. So yeah, that's why I'll occasionally go back into the black and draw some highlights going into it if I think I went too far. But that's generally how I treat the hair, just a solid shape. And then I go in with some of my pens and I get some like more controlled strands. You know, if there's too many large areas of white, I'll go back in and reduce them slightly by hatching into those areas just to simplify. Then I take my finest pen and then I do, a few errant, like extra light hairs. That would the way hair always tends to go. There's my hair. Um, her hat does look pretty ratty here, doesn't it? I'm gonna smooth some of it out here. I'm gonna take some of that curve out from there. Add it back to the hair. There we go. I use a very broad, open, speedy hatch for the hats. I find it actually gives a better sense of the plane of the surface of the hat. And it almost feels like like an old vinyl LP that's kind of been left out in the sun and kind of melted a little bit. But because of the directions of the lines going around the brim, it still feels like it's perpendicular to the peak of the hat. I'm going to go a little darker here, apply the shadows coming in the hat here. And here, to keep me from making a hairy line, I have to clean up in white paint after. I am going to mask that off. Make sure you can see that. One of the things with these liquid ink ballpoints, find the faster line, the finer the line is. Now, I haven't done a lot of the I think it's tulle, the kind of like super fine mesh that I did a lot of last year. I've been doing more patterns and more traditionally shaped hats. I got to get back to the crazy hats soon. I really like the crazy hats, especially with like all the flowers and stuff. But here I set up a very simple hat. Um, I've been doing a lot where it's like almost like a kerchief tied around the brim. Yes, today's witch had like a Puritan's buckle, which I thought was just leaning into that whole history of the witches in North America. I think this one. I did one I liked that had like discs around it. I had another one that had bells on it. I think. I think I'm gonna do. No, that has to be a bear. I was thinking like doing like phases of the moon going around the brim, which would be a nice witch thing. But I think the brim's too small to really get that across. So I think I'm just going to do a standard traditional brim. Even though I want to do more crazy brims, I think this one needs to be more of a satiny. I'll even mask off the edge here so I can stay away from it, but I'm going to push it a bit so I get a highlight. And do the same thing on the other side. Just carefully pushing it past the line. And then doing these super fast light lines, getting a value and rendering into that mid-tone between them. And I get volume. Magic. Oh, here we go. I've heard Gwendolyn Mesawan? Could be Machuan. I rings a bell. I've like the one I put in a tombstone the other day, Maggie. His name I remembered, and I Googled it, and then the story came up again because it's like I did a lot of. I wanted to do a witch story years ago, and it was someone who was researching witches, and he started putting things together, and he found out that there was something very specific with witches that has nothing to do with my current witches. And so I ended up with this master list of historic witches that were going to be still alive, even though they've supposedly been burned and executed and all sorts of other stuff. I wanted to imply that the witches at the time in this one horror story set up the witch scare themselves because they were being hunted by something greater than humans. So they made it look like they were made extinct by religious terrorists, as they called them. Um, but yeah, that's where my memory of those names and everything comes from. But yeah, so if I do another tombstone, I definitely would be using another historic witch or someone who may or may not have been, appropriately punished by witches for doing stuff like terrible things like burning them. But yeah, I like bringing historical references as much as possible. How are we doing time wise? Just a little after. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go maybe another 10 minutes. Mesa one. Okay. Um, 1987 November. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna finish the hat. I might do one of the gloves or the headboard, and then I'm gonna sign off so I can stop talking. Because that is after a day of just silently drawing away. Um, an hour or so of just talking constantly is a little much. It's almost like being at a con suddenly, and then you're just talking to everyone. I'm gonna let that dry before I go back in and ink over that. Hopefully that's right. Oh, that's pretty close to the bottom of the screen. Thanks, Matt. I really enjoy these live streams. I enjoyed it when I was joining other people, like on things that are getting sketchy and all that. Um, I like in particular talking with other artists. And one of the things I've been trying to set up is getting someone to essentially host on my channel, and so I don't have to do all the tech stuff. And then just having conversation with artists, just get another artist on board. They're drawing whatever they want to draw. I'm drawing whatever I have to draw, and we talk about work and like shoot the shit and talk about our projects, and just have a nice exchange of experiences and ideas and techniques with an audience that can ask questions and get answers to the various things that people have questions about. Plus, get to see us draw and make fools out of ourselves, hopefully, in the best possible way. I think actually, you know what? I think I want to be a little more vigorous in the hat cross hatching. There's no cross hatching in the band. So if I hatch into the body, it'll actually read as a different material. The texture will give it away. Yeah, that's working. Oop, I scribbled out a line. That's good. That's a white paint mistake right there. See that little line that went out there? Went under the post-it because I didn't pin it down properly enough. Right there. So that's before I scan, I'll take a little white paint, get rid of that. Now the hat's looking the way I want it. All right, so yeah, we're nearing 10 after 8. I think I got most of the interesting parts of this piece done. It's just at this point, it is literally just finishing up the bars. You already see me working the bars, even simple, just black outlines for the head bars here. A little bit more line work in the pillows and in the sheets. Just a little running here, signing here. I actually figured out an area where I was going to sign before I did it. And I might take my rubber stamp and just add a little bit of texture up here. Not entirely in love with the idea, but it might be a nice bit to just bring the bond to. It's always the last minute decision because I'm not going into this designing rubber stamp on this one, but I might just put a little bit of visual texture here, or I might actually just put it here, or I think it might work on its own. I'll decide before I scan. You like the foot? This foot? Yeah, I did find reference for that. I didn't draw that out of my head. That would have been hard. I've drawn a lot of feet like that. I probably could have come close, but this one's, I found a photo of a foot. I drew that foot. All right. So next Sunday, 7 o'clock, drawing another witch. So that'll be, this is the witch will be posted tomorrow morning. I'll probably try and design one that's also, I don't have to put a censor thing on it for YouTube, even though it's probably safe. I'm just feeling so burned by Instagram. I don't want to take a risk anymore. It'll be an update on the campaign. I'll answer if you guys want to think about questions. You can post them on here, and I'll try and remember to answer them during the next session. You want me to talk about anything I worked on or currently working on? I'm open as can be. But I want all my Canadian friends to have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I want all my Americans to just have a great weekend in general. I'll try and remember to wish you a happy Thanksgiving when it's American Thanksgiving. But other than that, I am going to take a little break and then finish this witch. And you guys have a good night.